I call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 7:01 PM. It is also being recorded and available by Zoom, although we do not have any members participating by Zoom today. All right, so I will start. Citizen request to address the Finance Committee. Are there any citizens who wish to address the Finance Committee today? Anybody on Zoom? No? All right. Approval of minutes of prior meetings. We have two sets of minutes that the committee should have, the minutes of December 15th and the minutes of February 7th. Did everyone have a chance to review them? I hope so. Yes. All right. There were some corrections
Yes,
submitted to the ones of February 7th.
they will circulate to everyone, but they
They were not circulated to everyone,
should
so.
be.
So we'll hold off on February 7th. So what about the minutes of December 13th?
I move that we recommend adoption of the minutes of December 13th.
Second.
All right, any comments? Nope. All right, coming to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. All right. First item on our agenda is consolidate information technology operations. Thank you for joining us. And thank you. We received materials. Did you want us to wait? Everything is,
He should be coming, so if you wanna get him, you can,
all right, so why don't we look at item, at 7:10 PM, fire alarm wire removal. That is an annual town meeting warrant article that is an item that we discussed previously. And we have removed the, fire alarm boxes throughout town, and this would finish the project. This is one where initial cost estimates were a little over $400,000. This, the fire chief had looked at a more efficient way to perform this task and has come up basically with a project that is just a little bit over half of the initial estimate. I would note that the initial estimate was not an estimate of the complete project. And so that is what that item is. I don't know if anybody has further questions. I see that the chief and assistant fire chief are here, and Jim was liaison.
We gave, I think, a fairly lengthy explanation last time. The only other things I'd mentioned is that the projected cost, if you did it outside the system, would also have two other adverse factors in it. One was that it wouldn't be the complete job. You'd still have some work to be done to actually finish the project. Second, there wouldn't be anything in terms of getting rid of all of the debris and old equipment. And then third, it also didn't include the cost of police details if such were necessary. And so in my view, this was a very innovative way of the chief to take care of a problem which has to be addressed, and doing it for a much more reasonable cost. And I think an added benefit is that there'll be some people within the department who are able to take advantage of this and make a little bit more money for their family. So I think for all those reasons, I would make a motion that we recommend adoption of this article.
All right, so Jim makes a motion to recommend adoption of the article fire alarm wire removal. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion by members of the committee? Further questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. I'm sorry, I should have said any opposed. I heard everyone say aye. Any abstention? It is unanimous. I heard all of you, so. Okay, so now we will go to consolidate information technology operations. Thank you.
Please, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Chief.
Thank you.
Good evening.
So we received your packet of information, thank you.
If our copies, for anybody need one.
Okay, I think we probably do appreciate one hard copy. We'll let Catherine have a hard copy.
Does the committee have my memo as well from 2 weeks ago?
They should have done all from 2 weeks ago.
I can get a copy, Catherine.
Okay,
This one?
yes.
Thank you.
There you go, Catherine. There's that one.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
That's the wrong one.
that it?
Yeah.
Oh, this one. Sorry. And I printed it
Yeah,
in my
can you
hand.
make copies of those and distribute them?
Thank you. Yeah, so sorry.
So I think, we could probably go through the discussion in two phases. One is what is the proposal for consolidation and what is the timeline for that? And then we can talk about what the dollars are, what the impact will be on the budget and the warrant article that is associated with the consolidation. I think that would be the best way to go. Thanks.
But since the superintendent will kick off.
Sure. So, I guess I'll begin by saying that for over a year now, it's been a bit of a ride and also a pleasure and a privilege to work with the town on supporting IT operations from public safety to Department of Public Works, finance, really all areas of operations in the town. And the memo that you have outlines, why we got here, why we're here. I will tell you that, a year or so ago, I thought we're gonna help out the town and kind of move on with our lives, if you will. I think it became really clear that both the infrastructure of the schools, the collaborative efforts that we've always had between the town and the schools, the nature of technology, the reality that the schools in town are already tied together, for example, in the financial services and human resources. The fact that we have a deep bench of strength, both technicians and I think with some leadership, that any town manager and I think concluded that this may be an interesting and an important prospect for the schools in town to join together.
Yeah.
As the schools in town did similarly with many years ago. And as the town took charge of maintenance and opposed to take charge of IT for the time. So it's been a long journey, I think, with the support of the finance committee, school committee, select board. We had somebody from the outside come in and look at our operations and recommend that to us. We know that there are some neighboring communities who are doing this as well. I also will say that it's important that this is not a, one and done, and, we just pass a warrant article, for example, town meeting and all set. This is a bit of a journey. This will take time. There are collective bargaining agreements that would have to be settled, discussed. There is a lot more infrastructure, planning, strategic planning that needs to take place. And so it would be a work in progress, I think, for the next 2 or 3 years for this to really settle in and be something that we can feel completely proud of and supportive of. So I think we're set up in the last year with the work that's been done and the relationships that have been built. I'm excited to, someone who's a bit skeptical is excited to partner with the town in this way and provide the support, recognizing that it's important for everyone in the community. And lastly, I'll say, we've had 1 or 2 conversations with our finance committee liaisons about this.
and this is important for you to hear from me, I believe it's important. In fact, it's essential, frankly, for this to work. For the finances and resources to come into the school department so that we can, appropriately manage them and deploy them for the town and for the schools. What I think is critical though, and what's proposed in the Kate's memo and here is that, we designate a line item in the school department's budget. And that because we have a strong relationship with the select board, finance committee, the school committee, and the finance committee worked on that for 20 years. That I think we have enough of a relationship that we can be very clear and transparent about this is what's in this bucket for IT, and this is what's in this bucket for all other school operations, to make sure that there's no, if you will, crossover between those. So I think the practices, the relationships, and the procedures are in place to make sure that can be something that we take care of very, very diligently. What else?
Well, I guess I just have to say again, having the school IT folks help us when we were really in a bind for the last year has been amazing. And it really has shown us that rather than replicating, a smaller ITC here across the hall, being able to use our resources to use the system that's already set up and already structured. There's a lot of systems that are in place in the schools that we can just move right into. It just made a lot of sense to us, and we're just really grateful that the schools and the school committee supported it. I know that there had been some question. I talked to the chair about public safety, so I actually went and spoke to the deputy police chief, the police chief and the fire chief. Access to secure HIPAA files or incident reports or things like that was not a concern of theirs ever. They said they never expressed that as a concern in the consolidation. In fact, they see it no differently than the system that we had in place when we had practically a dedicated IT person whose office was here, was over there a lot. They do need to be CJIS certified, but that's really no different than all of the custodians and public facilities employees who work in the fire station and the police station. Because if they hear something or see something, they need that clearance and that extra level of security. Deputy Baker actually pointed out that in some cases, school children records are even more sensitive than the records that are maybe kept over in the department. So that's just the piece I wanted to lay out, is that they weren't concerned about that. Their concern, of course, is 24/7 support for their operation, and they'd like to see more on-site support. They are confident that they're gonna be able to work out that level with Mark. And we have contracted out, and I believe we intend to continue to contract out the 24/7 support. We had an employee who was willing to answer the phone 24/7, and that's not a strategy for the long term. The person left, and then we were really stuck with no long-term solution. So the 24/7 nature of the police really, and fire, police particularly because they're running the dispatch. It's just really critical that we have that. So that was a key piece. And then on the resource allocation, I know there's concern that we all know each other and we all trust each other, but someday we won't all be here. And we agree that the systems need to outlast us. So we're working on a detailed MOU that we will be asking the school committee and the select board to sign, and that would really lay out what services the town will expect from the school department and what the school department agrees to provide. And we think that will go a long way to showing how we're sure that the resource allocation in the future won't be diverted away from town finance or town public works or public safety, because it'll be in agreement. Of course, anything that can be consolidated could end up being unconsolidated in the future if there was a problem. But we found through the same conversations that were had. I was here when we consolidated buildings and grounds, and then custodial and trades. It was experimental at the time, and it, I think, really has served town and school departments very well. With that, I think we're happy to answer any questions, and all of them have goes to Ann.
Yeah, yeah.
Here when we did the breakoff, we did it for a reason, because it was a different time there was no money for anybody. And there's a clash then within the school department between, the educational elements, maintenance and everything. And maintenance over time was just not done. And so in order to remedy that, we pulled it out and dealt with it separately. So I come back at it this way, you're actually correct in saying, I fully understand everybody right now is of one mind, that this is the right thing, I don't disagree. But everybody in this room is gonna change. You know, I come back to the question, whose budget then is it? Because my understanding still is we allocate one line in the town budget to the school department.
So
You can't touch it. It's in purview of the school committee. Say we have a rogue school committee that decides to do something different. What are the protections apart from the memorandum of understanding?
I mean, I think the proposal that we have put forward where there's a specific line item that's printed in the warrant. We're back here every year, and I think the finance committee, very appropriate role was all that money spent on municipal information technology, and we can either, or the future us, could either prove it or not. I mean, I think that's where your role, that's the critical role you play. The select board will be talking to the school committee about, if this ever happened, why are these services not being provided? But I think that finance committee can look at that line and say, what's going on?
Well, in addition to that, it would be the wish of town meeting, and I think that's important too, that the town meeting votes to appropriate budget, appropriate line item like that. That's the will of town meeting, and for a school committee, even if it's a road school committee. And I understand the concern, by the way, because the people I work with, but that's all.
None of whom are in the room, so don't worry about it.
That, they would have to face the consequences of town meeting as well as, violating a memorandum of understanding. I do want to say one thing about that, though. I've been thinking a lot about regarding budgets and the school budget, and the reality is in the school budget, when we have had challenges over, and at the end of every fiscal year, we have conversations with our finance committee liaisons to figure out what to do with the funds that are not expended and potential expenses that we have or anticipated in the new year. The reality for the school budget, and unless I'm mistaken, is that, and this is, I guess, different on the town side, and I'm not going to be eloquent about the town side, but on the school side, where we have volatility after town meeting votes a budget, it's really in two places. It's actually only in two places. It's in special education and in enrollment. If things happen on May 6th or 7th regarding students who move into the district, and this happens all the time, and we have not budgeted for them, we will then talk about the school committee, the finance committee, how we may have to hire people outside of the appropriation because of what's happened between May 6th, I'm making the date up, and September 1st. The rest of our budget, though, stays within those lines. It stays within in those buckets. We don't have a curriculum emergency. We don't have we'd like to do more professional learning, so we need more money for that. It's really in those two areas that are volatile. And the town side, I believe, and I'm going to say this wrong, you deal with that by providing funds and budgets for overtime. You don't know what the overtime is going to be for. You don't know if it's going to be more or less. But you have that within town budgets, fire and police, for example. We don't have that on the school side. So the volatility that we manage, which is always a source of conversation, is special education and enrollment. And every year, we try to do an even better job of honing that and making sure that we're presenting to you and to town meeting the right size budget. I think generally we're pretty good at it. But if we're not, because of the volatility of kids moving in, who have special needs, for example, we do come back to the table to see what we can work out. I see the same thing, and I say that because I do see the same thing at IT. There's not, if we budget appropriately, there's no reason why we cannot expend IT in the way it was intended. In the same way we expend curriculum money, in the same way we expend legal, in the same way we expend for our substitutes. And that happens because of this collaboration that we have and the confidence that goes into it. So I just want to add that perspective to it when it comes to budgeting, because I know that it's often a source of conversation.
I'm just gonna follow up on Paul's point. So while he was on the finance committee, I was on the school committee. And Kate was the town administrator at the time that we consolidated. And I mean, I recall those conversations. We were looking at overrides, operational overrides in those years. It wasn't that something was happening in May. It was, there just simply wasn't enough revenue
Yeah.
to support everything in town. And the school committee did what the school committee, in my view, should have done, which is you use your resources for the education, the direct education of the children, not the brick and mortar that surrounds the children. So I think that's the concern. Down the road.
But none of us are here.
Right,
Yeah.
and some of us remember what happened 20 years ago.
Right.
Like a lot of us remember what happened 20 years ago. And I completely agree with you in terms of the people in the room today. And you know that, because we've had that.
So, Madam Chair, I think there,
Yeah.
I guess two other budgetary things that are particular to the school department, so there can be transfers throughout the year. Would the municipal information technology be subject to transfers to the other rest of the school department or vice versa?
It would, that would not be the plan. The plan would be that those funds would be in that line item for what they're intended. You know, have you speak to that?
But there's no legal obligation.
Right.
I mean, I
There's no-
understand you're being.
There's no legal
Yeah,
obligation. Yeah,
I-
you're right.
you're
Yeah.
putting your good faith,
Yep, yep.
and we respect that.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the circuit breaker carry forward mechanism. So I think we've talked about that a lot, you know, at the end of the year, when there's funds that haven't been expended. Funds in that account can be carried over to the next year. And I think the intention is mainly for special education purposes. Would the municipal information, if there were funds that were unspent at the end of the year from municipal information technology, would those also be able to be carried forward?
Well, they would be, well, that's actually a fair question. They wouldn't be carried forward for the purpose of special education, but if there were funds at the end of the year, I mean, I think we would end up having a conversation.
You can,
Circuit breaker.
yeah, you can
Oh,
only carry
right,
forward
right.
for special education.
Well, right, but throughout the
Yeah.
year, there are often transfers into that special education account.
To expend the funds, we're not moving money into that account. We're moving expense to expend the funds that we receive from the state.
I think
So
it's-
there-
the short answer is no.
No, we wouldn't be able to carry forward. What would, if there were in the, you know, line on this document, it's line 2B, if that's what it was, and it's 2B. If there were funds left in that, that would be a conversation, as it is at the end of every year, fiscal year, about what's the, probably be turned over to free cash, I guess. Or whatever that.
I guess I'm worried that, because when we have those conversations at the end of the day, we always talk about, well, what is appropriate to carry forward, what is appropriate to turn back to the town. By allowing the possibility that this could be carried forward, it just makes more conversations. It makes the need for, well, the possibility of more disagreements. I just wonder, is there another way to do this, where you take municipal information technology as a separate line, make it very clear that the school department is in charge of the operations, but if the funds aren't fungible essentially with the rest of the school department monies?
Let me say this, I don't know the legality of that, I'd have to defer, is this, what is important to me, for this to be successful, is that these funds be available and under the jurisdiction of the Newton Public Schools. The mechanism for that, I don't have the financial bandwidth to
I
understand. what
believe
that
that the
is.
funds that are appropriated to the school committee are subject to that single line
Mhm.
item.
All of it.
Yes, all of it,
Everything.
yes,
So Madam Chair,
yeah.
to me, this isn't the hill I'm gonna die on, but I see it differently. But again, if everyone feels as though this is the right solution, you know, I'll support it. But I come from a large institution where I've been now for 16 years, and we would never put IT under any particular department. It's its own separate department. And that's what I had recommended, you know, a number of weeks ago, that it be a department under the town side. Just like any other department, but it wouldn't be necessarily under Dave. I would put it under, you know, the town manager. You have to worry about silos, you know, when people end up having jurisdiction over a particular area that actually goes across the rest of the enterprise, then there is a temptation, and it's just human nature, that at times the silo that you're in and the one that you're most preoccupied with, and that is your lifeblood, becomes, you know, predominant and preeminent. You know, oversight of data searches, that is a big thing. And I appreciate that both chiefs saying, you know, they're not concerned. I get calls once a month asking if they can do a data search on one of our employees. You know, I don't know how that's gonna be handled here, if everything is all consolidated under the school department. And again, I don't ascribe any nefarious or ill intent to anyone. But it's just what can happen under the circumstances. The budget will undoubtedly increase. Because they're once, and maybe it should increase for all I know, maybe there just are insufficient monies that are put towards this endeavor anyway. But I would suggest that we are gonna see a budget increase as the years move forward. The MOU probably needs to have at least what we call service level agreements. You know, in terms of, you know, what it is that your expectations are for the various departments around town. And as I said, I might have my own views on this, but it's not a hill I'm gonna die on, and if the town manager and the superintendent who are leading these two enterprises, to the tune of about 200 million. If this is what they think works, you know, I'm gonna support it. I'm not the town manager or the superintendent, never will be. I might do it different, but that's just not.
Except that we have to vote a recommendation.
So I will,
Finance.
so my view is, I'm gonna support the people that are running this organization, because I don't run it.
So one question that I have is, can it be a separate line from the school line? So what you talked about was really two lines within the school department budget. Can it be separate? So there's the school department budget that the school committee votes, and, you know, you do your normal budget process. There has to be input, a different kind of input from town departments into the IT portion. So I guess my question is, legally, can it be called out? It would still, you know, we're not talking about changing the structure, just calling it out slightly differently in the warrant. And I don't know,
I'd like to get back to you on that piece.
okay,
because I just
yeah.
wanna,
yeah. Because I mean, the process is gonna be different.
And I think you mentioned in the memo about the town charter. I know when the town charter currently explicitly calls out the school maintenance as being under the
Mhm.
town administration rather than the schools. If that were necessary to be explicit, that might make it clear.
But I don't think we're necessarily transferring, so I don't think we're transferring any of the departmental authorities, though. Like police chief or fire chief's authority over what their IT needs are. They're just being supported somewhere else. Right?
yeah, my question on the charter is, you know, again, we're thinking of the future, you know, the
Right,
town manager's role with the budget and expenditures and the school committee's role with what they, so I just need to,
Sometime
I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
so it's like, there's a
Yeah.
Minuteman line and there's a school
Right,
line.
exactly, exactly.
We hear you, we'll look into it.
Okay.
Is there any guidance on how other towns have structured this? Since we're not the first town to do this, I'm wondering what they have done, just even on the,
I believe in
Budgetary
Franklin, it's in the
side.
school budget, and in Brookline, it's in the town. budget.
And in Duxbury, it's also in the town budget, and,
It gets in the school.
one of the things.
We need a tiebreaker.
I know.
Wayland is in the town budget.
Duxbury was that
We have a town.
the fact that it wasn't in the school budget was a problem operational, because it did result in siloing. And resources just weren't efficiently allocated, it created some operational issues.
But the reverse can also be true. So it created operational issues for the schools. We want to make sure we don't create them for
Yeah.
the other departments. That's all.
Yeah, and you know, IT is different to Mr. Healy's point. Again, we'll say with maintenance, there's no question that there have been times that
Mhm.
superintendent's gone to town manager and said, give me that whole operation back. Because I'm not happy with how things are going, and we go back and forth. I'm glad that she's never.
I believe you've never. said
Yeah. Why would you ever have asked for that?
Well, it may have been on the way to town hall. By the time I got there, it simmered down and it didn't happen.
It does work, though. I mean.
But the reality is, and it's taken a while, but, you know, Kate has put leadership structure and processes in place. And that has made it successful for everyone, and I think that's important.
I did want to note, from the last version of the warrant to this version of the warrant, do you have which version?
We don't have, I
don't
have
think
the
the new
last.
is-
February 13th version.
Oh, so-
Is that the latest?
No, the
version?
23rd from, I'm sorry, that's.
We have the
I have the
13th. Yeah, we have the 13th.
I'll get it to you tomorrow. It's,
Okay.
it is, if you wanted it tonight, it's on the separate agenda. But, Labor Council from the schools, had raised a question as to whether the warrant article should also, and what article? Article 12, yeah, it would be, to also have the town vote to accept the provisions of General Law, Chapter 71, Section 37M, consolidating information technology services of the school committee in town, because this is something under the education law that is contemplated, and it seemed like, that would be a piece that would help clarify it, particularly with respect to the labor issues. That's in there now, if you want to take a look when you get the next version of the law.
The only other thing I would say, Madam Chair, is that there, you know, again, as Kate and Paul have said, you know, we're looking down the road. I've been at as I said, my place for 16 years, and we started out in one place where they had foots in both camp, and then it was consolidated, and then as of 3 years ago, they started separating it. So the point is, the suggestion that somehow this is the final, I don't think so. Because at some point, someone may say, wait a minute, I need someone over here. You may have the majority of the shop, but I need someone over here to help me when I'm in my office. So that's the difficulty of the IT world is everyone needs that type of assistance on an immediate basis. And when you don't have it, you tend to think that you need it.
To your other point, Paul, maybe you said this. About the budget. It is likely the budget, there'll be requests that will increase from where they are now, and in large part, that's because I think the data from the study showed that the town was under-resourced. And, you know, a good example of that is right now, the town of Needham has 24/7 public safety service to deal with anything regarding IT. But it's only had that for the last year, never had that before. So now we've survived. But there may be things like that, you know, on the town side or staffing, you know, change that may come forward as part of the budget process. That could be.
Where is purchasing of computers gonna be?
That could be on the school side.
Because everything has to be together, wherever you're gonna put it.
Yeah.
In terms of cybersecurity, in terms of logins and all that, it just all needs to be. I may differ where I think it should be, but it all has to be together in order to run a very efficient system.
And a safe system.
And compliance, where you have regular compliance that's consistent throughout the enterprise.
Yeah.
So, my other question has to do with the MOA. In terms of who's going to report to whom and how will that work? Because there has to be some reporting on the town side. There has to be, you know, something. It can't all the reports can't be to the school. And I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
expenditure reporting?
No, to make sure that everything that needs to be done is being done for the departments. Like, I'm not sure that we can legally transfer some of these responsibilities over to the school department and the school committee. So right now, on the town side, and it's not a question of support, but we're responsible for making sure that certain things are done for the town departments, from an IT perspective. And I don't know what the details are of what the various departments need. But I'm not sure that we can transfer that over to the school department.
I'm not, can you give an example?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, what do police and fire need? Like, police needs, well, I know a little bit more about fire, but so
Sure.
fire needs to be able to have up to date, the computers in the fire trucks, right? All right, so at some point, someone has to be responsible for making sure that they're installed, making sure that they're maintained. If they only report to the school department, so now we've transferred that, which is really a fire function, over something that supports the fire over to the school department, rather than that person being answerable to someone in town who's responsible for the fire.
I don't think you can win
When what?
that argument, because whoever you give it to, if you take it away from the schools and the school committee, they're gonna claim their jurisdiction as being, subsumed, and if you do it to the schools, then the town manager could make the argument. I don't know how you win it, because, when you're talking about one particular overall institution that doesn't have multiple, governing
I'm talking
bodies.
about the MOA and how in the structure of the MOA that is addressed.
Again, I don't see how you can win that in the MOA. I don't.
So when you say a report, so I didn't capture that.
So
what-
you have this structure, right?
Yeah,
Where you've got different employees have different responsibilities and you have a reporting structure as part of that. This person reports, to this person reports. to
say
this person.
reporting, I'm gonna also say supervising. Is that what you
Supervising,
mean? Okay,
yeah.
got it,
Yeah,
got it.
so who's supervising? And so then if there's an issue, where are those decisions being made? Because if the fire department has an issue, they're gonna report it back to,
It
I
would,
think it's
The town
exactly the same
manager.
as if the Pollard principal has an issue, she calls Dan, Dan calls me, it would go in the verse. I think that's exactly how it would work,
oh, yeah.
which is, I haven't heard from Tamika lately, but that's how it works.
I think that's the only way it can work,
Yeah.
because again, you can't give any ultimate control to anyone. Because at some point, you're gonna invade someone's jurisdiction, so there just has to be a consultation, language within the,
If a technician who is not, let's move fast forward and we come to an agreement,
Yeah.
collective bargaining agreement, where technicians now, there's one group of technicians and they work in schools or town or whatever. And if John Schlittler has a real problem with this technician, which could have happened, 40 years
right,
ago.
right.
At that time, he probably called Dave, or he might have called Kate. In this case, he'll probably call me and say, who do I talk to? And I'll say, I'll have whoever the CTO is, talk to you to get that straightened out. It would be the same thing, just as you said.
The
with-
chief might call you, the rest of them will. Then I'll call you.
However,
How about that?
however that works, he would probably call.
so there needs to be that mechanism within the
Yeah.
document.
Yeah.
And there probably, as silly as this might sound, probably needs to be some provision on how you resolve differences of opinion.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on the broad structure? All right, let's talk dollars. We've got actual dollars associated with this.
Yeah.
So, we are not proposing any additional staff. We think that with the current staff, both combined from the school and the town, we'll be able to implement, the structure. There are some additional funds requested for salary transition to align people to the unified structure. And to backfill some things that have come out of IT. In the future, there might be additional folks necessary for cybersecurity or some other function, but for now, we think that we can implement this structure with the same FTE. We have requested some additional funds in the areas that Plant Moran had indicated were sort of underfunded historically, perhaps by the town. And those are on page 3 of the FAQ document, at the bottom of the FAQ document. Specifically, we are looking for some funding for town-wide network monitoring, response, and cybersecurity training. As well as funds, and this is the 4th bullet down, to provide ongoing 24/7 managed services support for police, fire, and the other public safety functions. This is that sort of memorializing that ongoing service. Those managed services also help the town, and this is townwide help with advanced technical support for issues that our technicians need to call someone to receive support for. Additionally, there's some print management services, some network management services. Some device replacement, additional funds for device replacement, for the town. Plant Moran had indicated that the replacement cycle funding was, probably not adequate in that area. And some funding, one-time funding for some strategic plan and policy and procedure development for the defense.
Which of these are forecast to be one time?
Yeah,
and what's
that's
the-
It's the strategic plan and policy procedure development.
Is the only one that is a one-time?
Currently, yes. It's possible in the future that as we get more comfortable with the structure, that we won't need the same level of managed services support. But we're not at that juncture yet that we could reduce that funding.
Why does it say, the first bullet point of 204,000 is cybersecurity training? What part of that is training? That sounds like one time, or is that,
No, it's more,
so is it? an
training is
annual-
kind of an ongoing thing, and it can range from employee awareness around passwords to more advanced training for our technical support staff. One of the deficiencies that Plant Moran found out in, I think, both the school and the town's technology infrastructure is that we really don't have a good professional development budget for those folks. Those folks, there's always new developments. There is a lot to maintain some continuing education around. So we're looking at that as being a really a specific area for some ongoing PD for our staff.
Isn't it though also true that in cybersecurity, it may be that that is something that's outsourced as well, and so the expertise.
It could be modules, you could buy just a module that would be in data security training.
Right, and that could be, if that's ongoing, that could be part of the fund. It may not make sense to hire a person to be a cybersecurity specialist, because that maybe,
That
Now,
may
that-
be something we would assess down the road.
right, that we hasn't been, you know, they recommend it in their report, but we've discussed that that may not be the best utility of an FTE, that may be outsourcing it and funds there.
But you should consider someone around the realm of the chief information security officer, who, I'm not telling you what to do,
Yeah.
but that's the critical piece that will decide how that training will go and what type of audits you're gonna do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So
And none of those expenses are covered by other town budgets.
And the items that were identified in the study and which Ann is speaking to, no, they're not. Training is that are in town department budgets are more focused on their individual disciplines and not on anything to do with technology and security. Minor degree for public safety, there's training in their budget, but for public works, for HHS, general government, there is no IT training. That, to the extent that there was training, that was, finance part of budget, and that's part of the funds that are to be transferred over.
What about that DSR for, I think it was fire, that?
The two
Oh, wait, I'm
hundred
sorry, it was in finance, yeah, the
forty-eight,
$248,000.
that actually is going into this.
So that's
this
the
one.
tax levy,
Yes.
okay. So I'm just gonna say, and I'm jumping in, but I'm really uncomfortable with one-time funding at this level for things that are gonna be a recurring cost. $586,000 of recurring costs that we're funding with one-time funding.
The reason for the approach with the warrant article is to give a year, 18 months for the school department to get a better sense of the day-to-day operations when they're in control of it, to determine which costs truly are going to be ongoing And with that, if ongoing, you would see that in the budget requests in as early as the fiscal 2026 budget.
But maybe that is a better way to look at it. I mean, I would ask Dan and Kate, is there a way that you could relook at some of these items to see whether or not there is an opportunity to at least delay for one fiscal year? So that you can get your, get your feet wet and figure out exactly how this operation should run. And that might buy a little bit more time by kind of dividing it over 2 fiscal years.
I would say that most of these, specifically around the town help desk support and the 24/7 services, they're already happening. We've already had to implement that in order to provide that level of service. I think one of the particular priorities of the Plant Moran report was obviously the additional funding that might be required for townwide network monitoring and response. Additionally, the town is both the schools and the town are implementing Zoom phones, which combine phone and video. This is the ongoing funds to support both of those. We're in the middle of that project.
Digital landlines.
Digital
essentially.
landlines.
But my point, I get your point, but maybe you didn't get mine. Is it so urgent, since we didn't have it this year, we didn't have it the year before, is it so urgent that we have it for FY25 as opposed to perhaps, doing this over 2 years? I just ask you to consider it, because you can't tell me you have all of this now. God loves a consultant, and so does the consultant's family, because they will come in and they'll tell you everything you need from A to Z. I don't blame them, that's their job. But, I would suggest that some of this are items that we haven't seen in a long, long time. Maybe we should. But maybe we can do it, as I said, over 2 fiscal years.
Actually, so, and you mentioned some of these are already being done with the 24/7 support.
Yes.
Where are those funds coming from today?
They're coming from the current, because the 2 positions haven't been, there are a number of positions that haven't been filled in the technology department, that's the source of the fund.
On the town side.
On the town, budget.
So,
Coming from the town's technology budget.
so when the town's technology budget is rolled, I guess, are we double counting? Because if it's already counted in
We'll
that
be
budget.
filling those positions.
We're really running short.
And then, another question, sorry, about, I think it was to Louise's question about the warrant article. I think a big source is free cash. Because most of it is recurring, is free cash the most appropriate source?
For the current budget year, it is really the only source available other than the portion that would have been put into the finance department budget, $248,000, which is would be tax levy.
And then I guess to Jim's question, when we first had this discussion, I think the conversation was about 2025 being a transitional year. And I think this warrant article always has a discussion. But originally, my thought or understanding was that the budget impact would be in 2026.
I don't think that was correct, at least my
We
understanding.
talked
was
about
that-
not adding FTEs until at least 2026, like the cyber. Person.
One question I have is the strategic plan development one time. When would that work begin and what is it hoping to conclude? And would any of what they're focusing on have an impact on these costs?
Well, I think it's possible. I think that work would occur during FY25. It would be a townwide effort. It would involve all of the stakeholders and user groups that would be serviced by this new structure. And it could result in a recommendation that a priority for the town is to invest in a different kind of technology or
But I guess that's
a
my
different
point.
So then that's, I guess the question is that are we, like, everybody is asking the question, are we putting the cart before the horse in some of these expenses? And are we, I mean, clearly, according to Plant Moran, we're deficient in, many areas, but is it better to conduct the strategic plan and do what's necessary and then roll out the rest of this in fiscal year 2026 or later?
Well, the things that we had identified for fiscal 26 potentially are new systems that we, and there's no funding recommended for those at this moment in time. So if there was the need for, I'm just gonna, to replace the financial system. That's not currently a goal, it's not on anyone's radar, but should that be something that was recommended, we could consider that in a future year. I think the things that are requested here are really continuations of services that are currently being provided, as well as services that have been identified as critical from a priority perspective.
A minor example. So you're gonna expand the town device replacement schedule. Well, I'm assuming as we sit here right now, you are under some sort of a replacement schedule. I know Dave has a replacement schedule because I had his budget and I heard his discussion about it. So if someone is making an observation or a recommendation, you consider expansion. It's not a big cost, it's 52,000, but again, there's no reason you couldn't put that into another fiscal year. There's not. Because you're already on an existing schedule that apparently was doable, workable, because you're making do with it now. Yeah, I think I've said it 4 times, I'm not gonna say it, but if you guys can just take a peek at it, try and sharpen your pencils. I guess I'd be happier with this if we had a little bit more restraint. And I'll be honest with you, Ann, when I hear you and you're being very honest, which is fantastic, but you're basically saying, there's gonna be some things down the road we're probably gonna need, especially once this, survey is done.
I didn't mean to suggest that there is a certainty that any of those things.
No, but
I think
no, you're giving us a true prognostication that I would think it will happen. So my point is, again, if we could not make such a big bite out of it this year, then we might have a better opportunity and it might be more palatable to some of the taxpayers. But that's all, Madam Chairman. Once I get to 5 times, then I shut up.
Okay,
Kate says it's usually 7.
all right, so we had a number of questions that
Thank
are gonna
you.
need to follow up. Any other questions? So we'll have them on the future agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the-
Thank you. Thank you.
If you want to think it's.
Yes, let's do capital right now, while we have you here.
Page 23 of the.
I really don't. I only have the one.
Right, so page 23, we've got a whole bunch of them. High school fitness center equipment replacement, 32,673. One sentence.
So I'm looking, we can thank you. The program over the last, since high school's open, has evolved and changed. Some of the equipment has failed, and so this is not something we upgrade equipment for. The current program is and take it to the next, this is heavy stuff, so it'll last for the next 20 years.
And are you gonna have like an annual replacement cycle?
Yes, we already have an annual replacement cycle. There is a need to modernize some of the equipment and to
Any other questions?
I didn't have any questions, to be honest with you, Madam Chairman, the equipment, but happy to hear my colleagues.
questions. We're supplementing this budget with some grant sources.
For furniture, $25,000.
It's part of the
Annual request.
Yep.
Any questions on this one, furniture? Doesn't seem like enough.
You can get some chairs for us, put that in there.
Have you seen our chairs?
I'm very confused. There are no.
There are no ours because we kept getting
But they look better. They look better.
They're actually
Yeah,
not.
they
legal.
look-
You can't lean back.
Just-
No, I do like the comfort, but the arms.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're
We
comfortable.
have a contractor
Okay.
here.
Elliot,
Yes.
yeah, we were, it was bad.
Upset or because.
Yeah, no.
All right, Elliot, boiler replacement, this is for the design.
That'll be the, DPW.
Oh, that's the DPW, in the schools, okay. Newman preschool playground.
So this has been a project that began many, many years ago, and there was a long design process. It was complicated by COVID, it was delayed by COVID, and then there was a design process. We were going to erect something that resembled a ship's sail to provide shade in an area where we have children, many of whom have sun sensitivity and other conditions that require shade on the playground. The engineering logistics of that were just impossible. And so we went back to the drawing board and we now have a new design. Over time, the costs have increased slightly, but this is the incremental funding we need to actually implement this project and hopefully finish it this time.
Okay,
Madam Chair, so as I recall, 2 years ago, this was one of the items that was at least partially funded through the circuit breaker carry forward mechanism.
No, it's not correct. It's, this is funded through there is an amount of funding coming through the preschool revolving fund, which is a fee-based account that the preschool parents contribute to.
Okay, I remember 2 years ago, there was a discussion about circuit breaker carry forward. And the shade structure is definitely in there.
We have not funded the structure through the operating budget. It's been funded through well, it hasn't been funded yet.
right,
Well,
but the revolving fund is where you anticipated funding. it.
We
So what are
actually
you
have
funding?
incurred some expenses around the engineering design, which didn't yield.
Okay,
And that did come from the operating budget, it's funded by the civil budget.
any other questions? School copier replacement, this is your annual. Any questions on the school copier? All right, and then school technology, which is also an annual.
It's an annual request and there's no change in that request from what had been requested as.
Except for the additional equipment required for the town.
Yeah.
Right, so that would be, this is 661 plus the 52,000.
So this is for school.
This is just for- right.
But you're saying total, it's
Yes.
that plus the 52,
Right.
yes, for replacement devices and downs and stuff there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And we have the other. That's discussing the departments that are requesting those items come in. All right, scientific experts and consultants.
And McDonald is joining us.
And we're not gonna do the February 7th. It's the next step. Yeah.
Okay. I think we heard some discussion about this during the human services budget. You talked about this around the extras.
We did when I met with, yeah. So this was basically an allocation, if you will, so that if they needed to bring in for some future project, some scientist or consultant, that they wouldn't necessarily, they would have this hitting.
Similar to what we did with the planning segment.
Similar with planning. I think the difference in my mind is planning is a little bit more difficult to anticipate, something that's a bit more regular. And so my question to Tim was whether it was necessary to fund this 50,000 ahead when you could just come to the finance committee when you needed those funds, because it didn't appear to me that this was something that there was a substantial need on a regular basis. Tim, if you want to comment?
Sure. So I think as the finance committee knows, this was something that was approved, and I believe it was fiscal 21, wasn't touched in fiscal 22, was used last year when the State Department of Environmental Protection mandated an expanded testing plan for Claxton Field. So that was an area where we were able to retain a consultant to help us with our interactions with DEP, with our mitigation plan, and with further testing. That was an occasion where we used it very quickly. The Board of Health would love to see it renewed. Carol and Karen and I did have a discussion about, what is the difference between having the money in a warrant article that's available versus coming to the finance committee for a reserve fund transfer. And I believe the outcome is still the same. The process is slightly different. And I think the message I'm trying to relay is the Board of Health requested that the warrant article be renewed.
Madam Chair, I have no interest in supporting this article. That example that was given about Claxton is a great example of why the reserve fund is in existence. Something that is completely unknown, unforeseen, and the town needs to react, just like we always have throughout the years. And that way, the finance committee gets a chance to hear all the information at that time of what the urgent need is. And I don't know if the finance committee has ever denied a request that was urgent and in the overall best interest of the town. And I think we've done quite well by all of the Health and Human Services departments with respect to all of the other requests that we have considered and voted to approve.
Madam Chair, could I ask Tim, did the Board of Health approve the use of the funds for Claxton?
The Board of Health did approve the use of the funds for Claxton. I would say that they would have preferred it had not been, they would have preferred it be for a topic that they sort of originated. They acquiesced when the request was made. So
I renew my objection to this
Even
article.
more of a reason.
Yeah, that's even more of a reason. So, Tim, I think what would be helpful is if there are certain things that the Board of Health has in mind or anticipates needing this funding for, I think it would be helpful to provide that to the finance committee.
sure. So the best example, and I think the finance committee is aware of it because I included it in the write-up. There is a section of the Mass General Law that allows boards of health to essentially charge an applicant for a permit to allow the Board of Health to retain its own expert. That is only applicable when the entity in question is applying for a Board of Health permit. In the case of large-scale utility projects like Eversource's utility redundancy project, where they split the overhead lines and put one of them underground, they weren't coming to the Board of Health for a permit, so there was no mechanism by which to bring in an EMF expert, electromagnetic frequency expert, to weigh in sort of on the health implications of the choice to bury the line underground. So that's sort of the type of scenario the board envisioned or wanted. We, did our best to find, to do research, to get unpaid experts, to get, academic support. But that was the genesis behind the board wanting a sort of consulting fund, essentially.
Okay. All right, any other questions, board members?
Can I
Committee members?
just suggest, so if the $50,000 were not as a separate warrant article,
Mhm.
would it be appropriate to consider increasing the reserve fund by the same amount in order to really have that money available for the Board of Health if they want?
The reserve fund is plenty.
Sufficient.
Yeah.
What is it, 2 million?
And this is
God
a
willing,
release.
if that 2 million doesn't cover it, then
This isn't a,
we'll go to the
this is a
finance.
release of, this is a release of overlay funds.
Yeah.
Actually, it's now gonna be from the tax levy. This was the article to use tax levy in order to have that money available for next year's, for
Okay,
fiscal
so we can
26.
find somewhere else that we can use the tax levy. Like the IT article.
The 52,000 devices. The number that's familiar.
Okay. All right, any other questions? No, all right, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, so next we've got, amend general bylaw, non-criminal disposition, plastic bags, page 34. So, this is just a correction of the article that Josh presented at town meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, of the non.
Right, because this was not in the table.
Is it the
Right.
Scrivener's error?
Well,
A Josh founded error.
no, no, this is something different. I think this was, just changed in May and it was not included in,
In the
in the
October
article.
change.
Because the original article to put the table was meant for May and ended up being pushed to October.
So it's not included.
Is the dollar amount the same as what's currently in the bylaw?
I don't believe that there is an entry currently in the bylaw for this particular.
No, this is
Bylaw.
Article 10. The plastic bag one.
Yeah,
Actually, no.
I think there is
My
one.
mistake.
There is one, it's just the table that needs to be
Yeah.
updated.
Yeah, it should be the same.
So it's the same, yeah.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to recommend adoption of the bag article.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous.
You didn't get a second.
Oh, I did already.
Oh, you I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Speak from the process. All right, so now we've got authorized select board to remove restrictions, page 35. So this has to do with the Needham Housing Authority.
Can I ask a question or is there a
Yeah.
presentation?
Someone better give some.
Yeah, better tell us something about this.
I could do that.
It says article information blank.
Hello. So this is in the warrant, because there were a series of conveyances from the town to the housing authority in 1957, 61, and 1967. Three separate town meeting votes, each one followed by a conveyance by deed to the housing authority. All of the town meeting votes and all of the deeds, included a restriction specifying that the housing to be constructed on the properties conveyed would be limited exclusively to housing for the elderly. So that restriction appears again in the votes and the deeds themselves that appear at the registry of deeds. The housing authority is now in the process of trying to redevelop the property, and not limit residency of the newly constructed units exclusively to the elderly. So they approached the town about amending the old votes and deeds to remove the restriction, limiting occupancy to housing for the elderly. So this is effectively, I think, coming at the request of the housing authority to help facilitate the redevelopment of the property. But in order to do that, there needs to be sort of a go back and to look at the old zoning votes and to record something at the registry that would lift the restriction contained in the deeds.
Is this a policy change only, or is this to facilitate more funding for the development?
So I think what we heard from the housing authority when we talked to them about it, well, the occupancy itself of the new development is not going to be limited exclusively to the elderly, as I understand it. In addition to that, I think there's, what we heard is that the restrictions themselves, because they appear at record, will complicate their ability to finance the development going forward. But they can speak to that better. I think from as one of the drafters of the article, we're drafting it to remove the restriction that was included when the property was first conveyed.
So I'm not obviously don't do real estate, but this was a deed that had a specific restriction in it. And under what authority do we have to remove the restrictions? Is it because we were the transferor?
We were the original grantor of the
Okay.
property in 3 separate sets of conveyances.
Okay,
And because of that, we're, to the extent there's a restriction on the property, we, the town of Hingham, are the holder of that restriction. Though I believe it is within our authority, if we so choose, to amend that.
so Madam Chair, I'd ask, what does, I would think the select board wants to weigh in, you know, whether or not our elderly in the town might feel offended by the restriction being lifted. And Kevin, have you guys taken this up yet, or?
It's not come up yet.
Well,
But I would add, the state strongly discourages any age restriction. They do not want to see them. It will affect the funding for this project. And
who
further down,
the
the
state?
state,
The state?
Department of
Housing.
Housing and Livable Communities. They do not want to see any age restrictions.
I wish we'd known that at 57.
I know.
Well, I guess that's
Well,
my
that changed. I
question.
think that was completely, yeah.
It was,
Livable conditions changed.
Well, no, I have a question. So, sorry. So in those years, the town conveyed land to the housing authority of the town
Mhm.
and specifically said that it was to be used for housing for the elderly. And in order to specifically designated that, they had to have town meeting vote for that conveyance, but also that specific restriction on it. Would the town meeting have had to vote on that conveyance regardless? Okay.
town meeting would have had to vote on. that
Okay,
thing.
so now you're asking for the land to still be conveyed, but this you're going back to, I mean, like, the land is where it is, but that the restriction be lifted by another vote of town meeting to take off that restriction?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know, was there any sort of legislative history or discussion about
So-
why those restrictions were put on to begin with?
The old documentation from the old town meetings includes reference to an old set of statutes that expressly authorized housing to be constructed exclusively for the elderly. Those have all gone away, and now it is true, as Kevin stated, that it is housing limited exclusively to the elderly is disfavored and would likely run afoul of fair housing law. It is, I think, possible to construct housing project that is devoted exclusively to over 55 or elderly, but it is tricky to do. And it is in fact not what the housing authority is proposing to do with this redevelopment property. So that's a long-winded way of saying the law has changed, and it would be at a minimum considerably more difficult to construct an over 55 housing development now than it was
So could-
apparently back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay, so could this be construed though as reducing the amount of housing that is available to elderly in the town then?
As I understand it, the existing development is going to be raised in phases and replaced with newly constructed housing. That
And
Answer
more-
yes.
And more houses.
Answer yes.
But more
No, I
housing.
thought that there would be more houses.
But will it be restricted just for the elderly? And I
No.
think, well, was Karen's question. So the answer is no.
Right,
It will reduce the amount of stock for the elderly. Now, whether or not, I'd like to, you to send us some sort of a memo or something that talks about the legal issues here. Unfortunately, we have too many lawyers on this board, but I'd like to see that. And Madam Chair, I'd also like to, I'm not gonna vote anything until I see that the select board are interested in this as a public policy decision.
Could I also suggest that we have the Needham Housing Authority in?
They're coming back.
Okay, good.
They'll be back. So everyone, I am trying to get through the entire warrant during the month of March. So I would like to get all of our questions out in the month of March, if that is possible. So some of the articles may, not be as timely, but I think it's important for us to get our questions out on the table.
I gave mine.
Yep, thank you.
And this is not for you as much as for the Housing Authority.
Right.
Specifically, what are the financial implications, positive or negative
Of not doing this.
Exactly.
They can speak to that better than I
Yeah.
can, certainly.
Okay. Thank you. And when you have a draft of the article information, if you could send it to us, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, now we've got amend general bylaws, local historic district, and we have someone here.
Wait, there's somebody here.
We do.
I am somebody.
You are somebody. All right, so this is a long,
It's a long,
yes, it's very long, so if you could just summarize
Summarize,
what
sure.
this is all about.
Put a few notes together, so I'm gonna just read for a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Historical Commission has been studying this concept, since about 2022 as a means to protect this property from demolition. Currently, there are no local historic districts in Needham, and this proposed district located at 3 Rosemary Street would be our first. The committee was composed of the resident of the district, historical commission rep, history center museum rep, architect, planning board rep, resident, and realtor. So sort of the process overview, just to give you a little bit of idea what we did, is that the purpose was to create a single parcel study committee, was to draft the preliminary study report in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40C. And the details of the proposed district limits and the scope of regulations. I think I have a typo in my notes, but anyway, it's limited to 3 Rosemary Street. It's limited to exterior features. And this bylaw, that's proposed in front of you in the article, will establish a historic district commission, which is responsible for approving or disapproving proposed demolition or structural alterations of a home in a historic district. Again, we're only talking about one property here.
So this is Mo's?
This is
Yes.
Mo's house.
Okay, so what's,
Three Kingsbury.
all right, let's just cut to the chase.
Right.
So it's just one, you want to create a district
So we want to create a local historic district to prevent the demolition
of one property.
of one property. So what this general law, what this bylaw will allow is create this district commission, which is then responsible for approving or disapproving any alterations to the property.
So how did you decide on just one property though? Historic districts usually
Or a district.
are districts.
There are lots of single parcel, local historic districts throughout the state, and this was brought, I believe, and you may correct me if I am wrong, but I believe it was brought to the historic commission by the homeowner in an effort to preserve his property for the future. So it does not impact any other properties or locations.
What, why? Keith, are you still here? Yeah. Why couldn't the property owner, whenever they seek to transfer the property, and even if they put it into a realty trust, why couldn't they have certain conditions on the property that you couldn't do X, Y, Z?
I suppose you could, you need to find someone to hold the restriction. I suppose it's possible.
I mean, I understand what the homeowner values and wants to keep in perpetuity, and I respect that. I just don't know why we'd go through all this when I think he can do it himself. He can already do it. He can protect that property for the future, as I understand it.
I guess one answer would be that if a restriction like that would only apply for, I believe, well, those would not run forever. Those would run-
99 years?
No, it would be, I believe the maximum is 25.
How young are you? Trying to figure out you'll be.
Not.
I know I won't.
Yeah, no, it is, the restrictions that got on property are limited as to time.
Okay.
It would be likely 25 years that you could, would be the maximum that it could run for.
I like the ideas of local historic districts, but I will say, Allison, one house just seems to me odd, and maybe I just need to. Can you give us some examples in other communities?
I don't have that in front of me. I don't know, Miles, if you do. I think, again, the purpose for this is to prevent the demolition. So there could be other historic districts in the future and this set up a framework for that. But where
Gonna
this
be a
is,
sign? So.
It says historic district, yeah.
Haven't
Right
had
in
that
front
part
of the house.
Wow, and I
Yeah.
say this, instead of, I mean, just this.
Mhm.
I need all that language.
that's what you have. Thank you.
Sorry.
Is that okay?
But other
So
examples.
it could, but this was voluntary, right? So the idea was let's start with a voluntary rather than putting in an area and sort of
restricting everybody in that area to
restricting
those
everybody
rules.
in that area. So the first one out is it's voluntary. And usually you do have a member of the district on the committee.
Who wrote this, the warrant, the article?
I think it was a collaborative effort.
So a lot of it came from National Law, Chapter 40C, and then, certainly I was on to look at it, and then it was.
So it's consistent with what other towns have done for this?
The bylaw itself is absolutely consistent with 40C, and the bylaws you would expect to see in that area in terms of the level of what can be reviewed if an application is filed. And what the commission would do when it was looking at that application.
Can I ask another question before Karen? What happens if the place, and I'm not, you know, if you're listening, though, I would never suggest this would ever happen, but what if it fell into disrepair? What if it really just became a squalor? This once beautiful, you know, historic building, and you need to take it down. What do you do then? You don't go back to town meeting and take the restriction off again, do you?
No, I think at that point, the historic value of the property has been sufficiently diminished that you still need to apply for the relief to demolish the house, but the commission would need to take into account the fact that the property is not, in that scenario, it's not what it once
But
was.
at that point in time, it's the commission's vote. It wouldn't be the town or the Board of Health or.
Correct. No, this bylaw empowers the commission to review any applications, to.
I have no other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I did, please. Two, one, what is the benefit to the current property owner in obtaining this designation?
The benefit is that he's ensuring, or the goal is to ensure that it will not be demolished. Now, I understand we just talked about a scenario
I
that
think it's just personal, if you ask me.
it's to preserve the property.
Sure.
Yeah, it depreciates the value, and someone who wants to put up new shutters 20 years from now, you can't put up the new shutters.
You can't paint it.
Who
You
is-
can, Any color you want.
can.
Well,
Shut it.
so it's with permission of the commission.
Okay, so,
So it goes, so, go ahead.
I believe paint color is one of the things specified in the bylaw that the commission will not look at.
Oh,
okay,
okay.
well, I'm
But
less
there's-
concerned about that. So my question is so,
Throwing that out.
there is a benefit to the person.
Mhm.
So question, who has been bearing the cost of all of this work that is done to present to us on behalf of this for an individual person in the town looking to,
Voluntary.
okay, through the historical commission?
The appointing, I believe the appointing body was the select board for this committee. It was the select board who appointed the committee.
Okay.
Now, the composition of the committee is specified through this.
Okay.
bylaw.
So then if this were to pass, then this would be this protection on this particular piece of property and then kind of you give it up to the commission to a certain extent, like anything that anybody would want to do to that property at that point goes under the rules of this whole other established commission. Okay. And normally when there are bigger zones than just one property, do you have to kind of I don't know how this goes in other places, but like, would there be like a collaboration of other people in that area that are like, yeah, my house is historic too, or, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to do that because that's gonna be a total pain in the neck. Like, I mean, so, and sorry, coupled with that is, does then that make anything around that property? And I'm sorry, I don't instinctively know what property this is, so I'm just asking, really just generally asking. Then does that put any other problems on the surrounding homeowners that now they're subject to anything just because this particular, okay, I just
So
don't understand.
surrounding, any abutting homes or surrounding homes are not subject to any of this. It's only, and again, in this situation, it's the single parcel. If it were a larger district, it's whatever is within the bounds of the district.
Okay,
You had a few questions in there.
okay, well
So that was
then,
the last one.
Well, this did cost money. I think you wanted to know. if-
yeah, I just am curious like how these things are done. It just feels like if somebody wants to protect their particular piece of property, that they would kind of be the one moving it forward.
Town council
So
charged for these
So-
services, I think, right?
the rest of the committee,
Oh, that's-
I don't know how your fees work.
Yeah.
So
I guess I was-
that's outside of the scope.
I
of
was
my-
less being specific about kind of, there is a cost that goes with kind of moving these things forward and I just kind of feel, and I know I'm new, but I just feel like this is another way of kind of skinning the cat of changing particular zoning on specific pieces of property around the town to make them more desirable for people to sell them or to do things. I don't know. So I guess I just was wondering, like,
So
then my last question would be, so if other people were interested in pursuing this sort of option, you're saying this would create a blueprint, so the work has kind of already been done for people to be able to determine whether they could do this sort of protection for their own personal property.
from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if another homeowner, resident, somebody wanted to create another local historic district, they would still need to go through this process of the preliminary study report, and it would still need to go to town meeting for approval.
And you would have another district commission.
I believe so, yes, you'd have another whole
Every one of
study
them is
committee,
separate,
another,
Oh, really? It wouldn't be the same.
no,
because it's not the same historic.
it would be
district.
this new piece of mission. So we have the committee, that was the study committee, and then it creates a commission for the local historic districts, and that is the commission that would review any
add.
future applications.
So can I ask, why is this historically significant property, other than it's just historical?
It is, I
It
don't
has
have that.
very low roofs,
It's
ceilings.
the Kingsbury House, it's the oldest house in Needham Heights. It's one of the Kingsburys, which Jonathan Kingsbury, and it was built in 1779. So that, the historical significance.
I think the fee, what is the fee specifically for? Not like altering something without permission?
Proceeding to alter the property without first obtaining the sign off of the commission.
And is that subject, is this like the demolition delay, violating that, which is subject to a maximum number of days?
This would, I don't believe the penalty specifies a maximum number of days. It would be a daily penalty, for as long as the.
What's the financial ramification, Madam Chair? Is it, tax dollars if the thing goes down the tube?
So one of my questions was going to be, and would this property now become eligible for CPA funds? It's now been deemed historically significant. It is in its own little historic district. So now a property owner comes in and wants to do work or maintain it.
But who's to say it's not eligible now?
Right. I mean, I don't know the limitations on the historical bucket for the CPA funds, but I mean,
Churches.
we took the words out of my mouth. We have approved that for churches and other things, whether it's a resident homeowner, I don't know. I think there still would be a process for that going to apply for the grant. Certainly coming before you, select board. So there is a process in place, but I don't know of any restrictions, and I don't know if anybody else knows.
I'm not sure if it would be, I'm not sure it would absolutely be eligible, but it would certainly be something that could be denied by either the CP, senior town meeting.
But is that the financial benefit you're thinking of, or ramification?
Potentially. Now we inherit.
But beyond that, is there anything else? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out whether we even have a dog in this hunt.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Unless you think that, and I'm not suggesting it's a great idea, but if not doing this, somebody could buy the property, do whatever they want with it, put up a couple of homes, and that would be new growth.
Right.
So there is maybe tax implication, financial implication that is being impeded a little bit by this. But it is a historic home. I can see why, the homeowner wants to do this.
Madam Chair, can I, through you, ask Chris, I would like to at least get an answer as to whether or not this can be accomplished just by the homeowner themselves.
Yeah.
See, I understand you said there could be a time restriction, but I don't know, maybe 25 years is enough. I mean, I don't know, but I'm not sure. I haven't yet convinced myself this is a fight worth fighting for.
I can happily report back on how, if at all, this would work in the form of a private restriction.
It is a beautiful property.
The thought that occurred to me, though, in response to your comment from earlier, is that the ability to modify or amend or do things to the home if it was someone holding a restriction, would be a private matter between two private parties. The benefit, the sort of added municipal benefit of doing it through a bylaw is that it is a town committee appointees who would be reviewing any request to amend or change the property going forward if the bylaw were adopted.
Well, I have another question then, Madam Chair. How many other properties in Needham, if a homeowner asked for this benefit, are there?
Yeah, would be eligible.
That are substantially similar?
I don't have the historic commission registry in front of me. I forget how many properties are on that. It still would have to go through the same process.
I'd be curious how many there are.
We can get the list, it's actually on our website.
It's on the website.
Yeah, there's a
Somebody
list.
wants
And
to pull it up.
I'd be curious to, I don't need to have a dissertation, but what year and historical significance, just a comment, whatever it is. I'd just be curious
All of
where this fits into it.
And other response I'd add to that is that the statute 40C does call for a study to be performed by the study committee anytime any property is being considered for inclusion here. So there could be certain baseline facts that we could cite, we could sort of sift for, like how old is the property, how old is the house, you know?
And the
that-
historical significance in relation to the town.
Right.
You know, being the oldest home in the Heights, a Kingsbury family name. I mean, there are lots of, several old homes that are not on historic registries, again, by choice of the homeowner. So I just want to put that out there.
Madam Chair, would they have to get rid of the electric charging station?
No.
No.
Until no.
They don't, there are current
I
solar
don't think
panels.
they had that in 1780.
They do not. There are solar panels on the property, so it's restrictive in the sense of demolition, anything you can see from the public way, but there's a lot of flexibility for updating to current standards in an effort to preserve the historic structure. There's an understanding that we do need some modern amenities.
I would imagine it's de minimis, but is there any financial impacts on the building commissioner's work to enforce this?
Building commissioner can't issue a demolition or building permit until after it has gone through the process of the commission's review. So, and I don't think that review involves the building commissioner anyway. So it's a volunteer board that's looking at it to determine whether the work proposed is appropriate or not. And so nobody's going to defer to the building department until after they've obtained the approval needed by the bylaw.
No, but I was also thinking about the fees, monitoring the building in case an occupant were to violate the bylaw.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, if the neighbors are gonna notice work being done, they'd call the building department and say they need a permit. So I think that report comes in. I don't think that involves a lot of proactive enforcement.
Okay.
Like we're 100% certain that neighbors will report.
All right, so we can get those on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance committee update, Southern finance committee update. No. Okay. No,
To adjourn.
not reasonably anticipated. Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, it is 8:33 p.m. All those in favor? Any opposed, abstentions, it's unanimous.
And can we have a schedule